Hello, everyone. This is Mr. Laporte, and looking at the assignment we had from last time, we're asking you to fill this out in section 2. So I was just going to send out a video and looked at it, and it was over half an hour. So I was like, wow. I was having so much fun, but I know half an hour will be a little bit much for you. So I'm going to try to synchronize this into a smaller amount of time for your benefit. All right, so just quickly, you should have already filled this out. Section 2, guided reading and review how the federal government works. And the responses we were looking for, officers of the legislative branch would be the Speaker of the House, which currently is Nancy Pelosi, the head officer of the Senate is kind of difficult because there is the president of the Senate, oddly, who is the vice president of the United States, Mike Pence. But the vice president is not always of the party that's in control of the Senate. So we have a position called president of the Senate pro tempore, which is currently Chuck Grassley of Iowa. I've met him, nice guy. Probably the most respected person in the Senate from either party, and he's been there for 30 something years, 38, I would say. So he is then, with that position, is also fourth in line to the presidency. If something were to happen to the president, vice president, and Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Grassley from Iowa would be then president of the United States. The other odd thing about this is that even though he is then the president of the Senate pro tempore, the one that actually conducts the business and gets things done in the Senate is the majority leader, who at this time is Mitch McConnell, a Republican from Kentucky. And he is the one that is kind of like the Speaker of the House of the House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi. He is kind of the version of her in the Senate. So, but oddly, we have this position, president of the Senate pro tempore, that is in line to become president if something does happen to the other three people. All right. So then, what are the duties of primary duty of the legislature is to make laws, and some of the checks that they have on the other branches are they can declare war, they can tax, they can establish laws in the military, rules and commissions for officers. They can override veto is probably the most powerful thing they have besides making the laws. They can override a president's veto, and they also the Senate approves the judicial branch, and the House is in charge of money. Any bills that deal with money have to start in the House, and that also is the budget for each branch. Uh, uh, each cabinet of the president's, uh, like Secretary of Commerce, the budget's going to come from the House. The Supreme Court's budget's going to come from the House. So that is the power of the purse is a great power that checks the other branches through the legislative branch. All right, then the executive branch, the president, Donald Trump, vice president, Mike Pence, their job is to execute the laws, to make sure they are enforced. And then probably the greatest check that the president has on the other branch would be the power of veto to veto laws that he does not agree with, which veto meaning to uh, cancel. But the House then can override it with 2/3 in the House and the Senate and pass a law over the president's veto. The president also has the power to appoint uh, the members of the Supreme Court, who then need to be approved by the Senate. So, and every time you have a position, there's usually a check from the other branches. We just can't list them all here. So then the Supreme Court, who are they? You have the Chief Justice of the United States, John Roberts, and then the Associate Justices. You have three women that are Ginsburg, Keegan, and Sotomayor. Then you have five male members that are Alito, Breyer, um, Keegan, Gorsuch, Thomas. Um, those are the members of the Supreme Court. And then looking here, I won't go over each of these individually, but you should have the definitions of the term bill, electoral college, appeal, veto, override, and impeach. All right, so the thing I'd like to talk about now is the electoral college. The electoral college is determined by the census in Article 1, Section 2. It says that every 10 years that the United States shall count the people, enumerate them, which means to count the people, to determine representatives in the House and the Senate, apportionment, how they will be spread out, and that's through the census. Your next assignment is, in case I forget, you have a quiz here that after we're done, you should be able to take this quiz. And then the next page is looking at how many members, how they're determined through the census. And in this one, it shows which states are adding representatives and which states are losing representatives. This is through the 2000 census. The current census is this map that I'll show you right now. This is how it is distributed at this time. And you can see Wisconsin, we have 10 electoral college voters. And these are people selected in the state of Wisconsin to vote for president. And it's based on each state has 2 senators, so you get 2 for that. And then we have 8 representatives. Our representative for our district here is Ron Kine, a Democrat based out of La Crosse, but represents us here in Altoona. So we have 10 electoral votes. And by looking at the electoral college, you can figure out the population of a state. If you take -2 for the senators, you have 8, and you times that by 700,000 people, and you come up with the population of the state. Minnesota, Maryland, and Missouri, very similar to us. They each have 10 electoral votes. So these electors are chosen by which person wins the popular vote in a state for president. They then select electors then to meet and give their selection for president. So if Wisconsin, last time we voted for Donald Trump for president, the 10 electors met and they all voted for their choice. And then that choice was then sent via register mail to 4 different places, but one of them being to the Vice President of the United States, who at the time would have been Joe Biden. And he then takes all the electoral votes from all the states and counts them in front of both houses of Congress. And oddly enough, sometimes more than not, the vice president is actually showing that they did not win and they are the losers as they announce the vote total. So that's happened quite a few times. And occasionally the vice president is then stating that they are the winner of the election. So this is a unique process that we have. And it's a compromise between states with just counting all the popular votes A state like California with over 30 million people, if they're slanted more to one party or person, they could determine the outcome of an election on their own. Example, Hillary Clinton won a state of California by over 1 million to 2 million votes. She basically could have been president based just on the state of California results, or you throw in New York in combination with that. So our system kind of gives a little more power in the electoral college to smaller states and um, middle populated states. So the electoral college, you need 271 votes to become president. I think Trump might have had 320 electoral votes to Hillary Clinton at 221 or something like that. So it was about 80 vote difference using the electoral college. But if we just went by popular vote, that Hillary Clinton would have been president. So we take a census every 10 years. This deals with Census 2000. The map that I'm showing you on the board is what is currently used, but then we are in a cycle right now, 2020, where we are taking the census. We just filled out a form. Your parents probably have the form, and that is filled out, and we count all the people and then determine electoral college representatives for each congressional district. And my research has shown me that, like, California will actually lose a member of Congress. That Texas might gain one or two, Florida might gain one or two, New York is going to lose one, Pennsylvania might lose one, Minnesota could lose a representative. So there's a history in the last 50 years, population's been shifting to the Southwest and the South, and we, in what is called the Great Lakes, the Rust Belt, the Midwest, we've been kind of losing some population. All right, so you need to read the map mystery and read through the directions and the statements, and then fill out the questions at the bottom. All right, so next week we'll get into section 3, but just kind of summarize 2 things: that the legislative branch has the power of the purse. Anything that requires funding is going to start in the House of Representatives. Speaker Nancy Pelosi is kind of in charge of that. Then it moves on to the Senate, which Mitch McConnell is in charge of that. Then it moves to the president to either sign it or not. On page 256, it talks about the elastic clause, which is in our federal system. This is probably the part of the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, which gives Congress the power to enact laws or the powers to do things that are necessary and proper to function as a government. So that at times kind of they butt heads between the national government and the state government, that the state says to the national government, why are you doing that? You really shouldn't be doing that. And then Congress will say, well, because it's necessary and proper for us to function as a government. And then sometimes that leads to challenging the Supreme Court.